Hi there, my name is Leslie John, and I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School.
We have literally the world's leading expert, Professor Leslie John of the Harvard Business School.
Author of the new book, Revealing.
Trust, it's really the currency of social relationship.
I have spent the past 20 plus years thinking and studying about trust. And today I'm going to answer all of your questions about trust. Let's get into it. Question 1, how do you build genuine trust with a prospect in a 30-minute call when they know you're trying to sell them something? Ooh, we started with a doozy, didn't we? I think one of the first things you can do to build trust is by asking them questions, actually. Not interrogation-style questions, but ask them questions about what they're interested in, what they're looking for, what their goals are for the call. When you ask someone questions, it shows them that you care about what they have to say, and when they answer the questions, they feel understood and heard by you. And then, as a salesperson, you actually can give them better suggestions, because if you really know what they want and care about, you can better meet their needs. I've been told that I come across as too salesy. How do I change this? This is good. So what I would say is less selling. Truly, to sell more, it's not just act less salesy, you have to be less salesy, which I know sounds super counterintuitive, but it's true. The reason is that, one, when you are in sales mode, people can tell it doesn't sound very authentic, and we get our spidey sense up, right? Nobody really wants to be sold to, because we think about the kind of mental model of a salesperson, like it or not, is that they're going to sell us something we don't need or want. And you are actually less effective as a salesperson if you sell. By sell, I mean like extol the virtues and only say the virtues and be like, you need this product.
The best beer in the world.
Pay only $8.75 a gallon, so you could get the biggest savings of all.
So what does it mean to sell without selling? What it means is you want more inquiry mode, less advocacy. So advocacy is pitching, selling, persuading, the stuff we think sells, but what actually sells is inquiry, curiosity. So you want to ask questions. You want to learn from the client what they actually need by asking them questions. In fact, studies have found that the more questions that salespeople ask in sales calls, the higher the likelihood that the sale is closed. And then there have been many experiments where people have been like randomized to ask more questions in sales context or not. And the people that are induced to ask more questions, they actually perform better. Is there a way to seem more trustworthy? First of all, the way that question is framed makes me bristle a little bit, because it seems like the focus is on appearing trustworthy as opposed to being trustworthy. Maybe I'm reading way too into it, but my answer of how to seem more trustworthy is really simple. Be trustworthy. And in that vein, what not to do, you do not want to say to someone, you can trust me. People build trust not by you telling them you can trust me. In fact, if you say that to someone, it often backfires. We've done studies actually where we have given people strong assurances of confidentiality. So when we ask people for their information, one version of it, we say, we're going to protect your information. You can trust us, all the assurances. And what we find is that that makes people less comfortable sharing information with us, less comfortable than if we give them no promises at all. Now, the take home here, it's not just give people no promises. Rather, you got to show you're trustworthy. You got to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk.
I trust I don't have to ask you twice to download the free Trust Playbook that we have in the link in the description below. It's full of tips, tricks, and frameworks for how you can build trust with prospective clients, team members, and more. Get yours now.
Okay, how do you build trust with clients remotely when you never meet clients in person? Yeah, that's the question of the age, right? I think it's the same way that you build trust in real life, offline interactions, but you have to be extremely thoughtful about it. By that I mean you have to really make sure you do it. How do you build trust? What's one of the best ways, if not the best way to build trust with someone? It is to reveal, to open up. It's not saying you should open the call and start trauma dumping on them, not at all. But you might want to ask a couple of questions that elicit kind of who they are, what their spirit is. This is what my book is about. The point is, people love talking about their personal preferences, and then when they tell you that, they feel like you know them, and then they trust you, and you're off to the races. In fact, there have been studies where they've put people in brain scanners, fMRI machines, and they've had people answer questions like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Questions that allowed people to self-disclose personal information. And what they found was that when they put these people in the brain scanner and they got to answer personal questions, the pleasure centers of their brain lit up, so to speak. So indicating that revealing, self-disclosing is pleasurable. And when you do pleasurable things with other people, you like them more and you trust them more and so on. Next question. Am I shooting myself in the foot by being honest? I was promoted in a sales role, underperformed, and decided to voluntarily move down to my previous role. I've since left my company and I've been applying for new roles. In interviews, I've been honest about changing positions because I wasn't quite ready for the role. Is my honesty hurting me in the interview process? That is a great question. I think sometimes earnest people struggle with the concept of honesty. To not share the whole story is not necessarily being dishonest. I mean, it's a job interview, so it's understood, it's accepted that you're going to be presenting yourself in the best light possible. One of the things that I always advise my executive students and clients is that you need to have a story. You need to get your story down, and it needs to be, of course, true. But in making your story, in crafting it, you have to figure out what to emphasize and what to de-emphasize. So to me, when I just read this, I don't have any more details. It strikes me that the voluntary demotion is something that you probably don't want to be talking about a lot. I think you want to emphasize what you're looking for in your new opportunity. And you want to talk about how excited you are about that. And so whenever someone's asking you a question in an interview, when you prepped your story, you've prepped your raison d'etre of why you want to move, you can easily pivot to the story, the part of the story that's most relevant, that will be most satisfying in that moment, and that will present yourself in the best possible way. So I liberate you from, you don't have to tell them every single detail of the last job. And in fact, when I see this, it says I underperformed. Well, underperformance is not just the employee's fault, right? So much of underperformance is not having the right mentorship structures in place. Okay, rant done. Yes, I made that one. Okay, here's a good one. Does being vulnerable or admitting you don't know something kill my credibility? Ooh, this is a really good one. And it's a valid concern, right? I study self-disclosure for a living. I wrote a book. You should get it. No, I should stop selling it. I can tell you that people are really worried about being vulnerable, about sharing sensitive information, precisely for this reason. In workplaces, you worry that you might come across as weak or like overly emotional, whatever that means. But I can tell you that if you do it the right way, it not only makes people like you more, but it also can enhance your credibility instead of detracting from it. One of the things you really need to be sensitive to is understanding where you are in the status hierarchy. When you're in a high status position, when you're in like a position of leadership, if you're leading the meeting, you have a lot more leeway to be more open. And in fact, this is really helpful and credibility boosting because we found in our research that when leaders open up, when they share a little bit about what they're working on, like I'm working on my organizational skills, or I'm trying to get more comfortable public speaking, right? Those kinds of weaknesses, not damning weaknesses, but legit weaknesses. When leaders go first and share that, it makes their teammates and their employees, it makes them trust them more. It makes them more motivated to work for them. So it makes essentially the leaders more admired, more liked and trusted and viewed as credible. So that's a good thing. Now, when you are in a lower status situation, that can be trickier, right? And there, what I would say is understand the difference between vulnerability, which is revealing sensitive thoughts and feelings. That's pretty high risk, though high reward. And the other is transparency. Transparency is like saying your thought process out loud. Transparency is much less risky, and I think it has kind of the low-hanging fruit. You get a lot of bang for your disclosure buck, so to speak. So what would transparency look like? So suppose you're at work and your boss says to you, oh, you've been really quiet in meetings, right? Which I guess is not a good thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Sorry, I'm being snarky. I'm an introvert, and so I feel like we're required to talk more than people should. Anyways, your boss comes up to you and he says, you've been pretty quiet lately. Vulnerable answer would be, yeah, I'm kind of feeling insecure about what my contributions might be, and I don't know if people are gonna judge me or if I have the right things, and I really don't know. That's vulnerable. Don't do that. But also, don't refrain from self-disclosure. Don't just like say, yeah, and move on. Like, that's not good either. That's off-putting. That comes across as like defensive. A transparent response here would be something like, yeah, that's fair. You know, the way my mind works is I tend to like some time to process what people are saying, and then I can come up with a much more substantive response. Right? And now you're taking this thing that is like kind of a weakness on the surface, and now you're actually being strong. You're taking it and you're turning it into a strength, all by being just a bit more transparent. So no, admitting you don't know something, vulnerability does not necessarily kill your credibility. And if you're smart about it, you could actually use it to boost credibility. How do you rebuild trust with a client after something goes wrong? Because something will go wrong. So this is a very practical question. The first thing is you want to acknowledge what went wrong. You want to own it. You do not want to explain. Explain reads as defensiveness. It reads as coming up with excuses. You want to acknowledge, you want to take responsibility. If appropriate, you want to apologize, and you want to give a credible display that it's not going to happen again. That's kind of the real magic of apologies and of building trust, is a credible commitment to not do it again. And that also entails listening to the client, listening to what went wrong, because you really have to have an understanding of them in order to give a credible pitch for how you're going to help. So one analogy is actually, at Harvard Business School, one of the hats I wear is the chief bad guy, which is I'm in charge of what's called the Academic Performance Committee. So when MBA students get enough bad grades, they have to petition to my committee in order to return back to complete their studies. And I've dramatically changed how I approach these meetings. They come to me and they're upset because sometimes they're going to be kicked out or whatever. They have to go on leave. And I would say all the things, all the bad grades they got, and then those conversations never went very well. So instead, I completely flipped it. And what I do now is I spend the first 20 minutes of the 30-minute call at least just listening to them, just letting them tell me why they're, like, they know why they're under review. They don't need me to tell them that they got bad grades, but the act of them telling me how they feel and how they processed it is a really important process, because it makes them feel understood by me. And then, and only then, can I actually credibly help them? And then I say, okay, how can I help? And then we're so much more constructive. And inherent in this is so much more trust. Another one, got it.